Hello, I'm Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, and you're watching Vote Watch. I'm doing one of my deep dive interviews, and today I'm joined by Lee Harris. Lee, thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here.
So, obviously, the big story in the last couple of days has been the return of Donald Trump and his inauguration. I mean, I don't know. I'm thinking about wearing my cap, but I don't want to ruin the hair and the look. So, there we go. Well, we've both got the caps. Did you? Well, I mean, Trump 2.0, obviously back in the White House. Did you watch it? Did you catch bits of it? What's your thoughts? Are you happy?
I did watch it. So from but about half an hour or so before he was sworn in, I watched it and watched the whole thing unfold in its pomp and ceremony. Absolutely loving it.
Yeah.
Very very excited about Trump being sworn in as president. But yeah, I watched most of it. I didn't watch. I think once he started signing the executive orders, I switched off. But I still followed it on social media, watching exciting tweet after or post, I should say, after exciting posts come out. One of the big ones was leaving the WHO. Fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just wonderful to see how quickly he's hit the ground running.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. He's done something like 200 personal orders, 42 executive orders. He's obviously pardoned 1,600 Capitol rioters. What I loved yesterday was just getting little clips of the whole day unfold. And the moment for me was when he was dancing to YMCA with a sword, of all things,
Yeah.
at the ball in the evening. I mean, it's just politics is going to be fun again for the next few
It
years, isn't
is.
it?
It is. I saw that clip this morning. I didn't see it last night, but it did make me laugh. He's swinging the sword around, dancing to what? But no, I think you can really sense even just from watching it on the television and listening to commentators that are actually in Washington at the moment, that there's a real sense of optimism in America, and
Yeah.
even in Democrat states. I mean, places like New York, which is which is predominantly a Democrat area, or was a Democrat area. There's a real buzz on the ground, according to people that are there, about the future of the United States of America. Now it's under Trump. And I think, one word or, phrase that comes out of this for me, which seems to be repeated over and over again, is common sense.
Yeah.
And common sense is coming back to America. And as we know, whether we like it or not, what happens in America will happen here about 5 years later. I just hope it's not the whole 5 years. I sense it's already starting to happen over here, but it's a complete and utter rejection of, woke, left wing, radical ideology that has infested every single aspect of American society. And you can argue the same thing has happened over here. So it feels like a massive, massive win. And it
Yeah.
feels like a very pivotal moment in Western democracy's history.
Well,
And I'm incredibly excited about it.
well, that's the thing. I mean, I was just watching all of it, and it's that sense of optimism, and we're stuck here with two tier, three
Mm.
gear, never hear, son of a toolmaker Keir. We're stuck with him and his constant talking down the UK. I mean, literally, they've talked the UK into into an economic crisis. And whereas over there, Trump's going, we're going to drill, baby, drill, and we're going to
Mm.
put America first. If we say anything like that here, we're far right, apparently, for caring about our country and our flag. What do you think it means for the US and UK relationship? Do you think there's going to be those difficult questions and conversations between President Trump and PM Starmer?
I don't know. I mean, I've given this a lot of thought, and I think that underlying everything will be an unwavering support for the special relationship.
Yeah.
Trump, as we know, and I've said on this podcast before, he loves this country. He genuinely loves the United Kingdom, and so does Elon Musk. They both love the United Kingdom, but they clearly have a problem with Keir Starmer. So I think relations will be different than they have been in the past.
Mm.
I don't think Trump is going to give Keir Starmer everything that he wants. And I don't think unless there, of course, is some movement from Keir Starmer. But I do think that Trump is respectful enough to not hurt the UK bigly, as he would call it. So sting us with massive tariffs and things like that. I don't think that he will do that. What I do think and hope that he does is I really hope that he puts pressure on Keir Starmer and uses the diplomatic pressure, possibly even via Elon Musk, which would be a very sweet move, to say, look, if you're going to put people in prison for hurty words on social media, if you're going to lie to the British public, if you're going to act like an authoritarian tyrant, we're not going to give you a decent trade deal. Like I said before, we would, if we go to China, we use our diplomatic influence to talk to them about human rights issues. I should hope very much that the Americans do it to the UK government, because we have a serious problem over here.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've already seen, the Chagos sellout has been put on pause, waiting Trump's approval. And I can't imagine him proving selling and then buying back an island on a temporary lease that you owned in the first place, which has got a military base on it.
He's a businessman at the end of the day, and he will absolutely not see that as a good deal for anybody. We know already, by the way, that every single member, I think, pretty much of his administration is vehemently against the Chagos Island deal anyway.
Good.
So another embarrassment, I think, around the corner for Keir Starmer on that one. The headlines will be unavoidable. Trump saved Chagos Islands. Simple as that. And Keir Starmer won't be able to get rid of it.
And we've talked a lot about Elon Musk. I do have to ask, obviously, a lot is being made about this Elon Musk, my heart goes out to you gesture.
Oh, it's ridiculous.
And people saying he was Nazi saluting and all of that. I find it interesting how you can pause an image at any moment and suddenly it's a completely different image. And likewise, the number of people who've gone and found photos of other politicians and paused it at exactly the right moment and said, well, hold on. Clearly, all of them are doing these salutes as well. I mean, it wasn't a Nazi salute, was it?
No, of course it wasn't. I saw James O'Brien this morning trying to tell everyone, I'll argue with anyone that it wasn't a Nazi salute. Of course it wasn't. It's ludicrous. This is, I think, sheer desperation from those who are absolutely mortified that Trump is now, again, the president of the United States. And they're grasping for straws. I mean, they flipped recently, haven't they? I mean, they're so desperate that, they've stopped calling Trump a Nazi and now they're calling Elon Musk a Nazi. I mean, it's just childish, pathetic nonsense. And they're doing effectively the same thing that our Labour Party did, which is completely not think, A, about diplomacy, number one, and B, that they might be in power again at some point. So these are children who are desperate. And, of course, Elon is very, very clear what Elon Musk was doing. Elon Musk was sending his heart out to the people, because it was the phraseology that he was using at the time. He was thanking everybody in the audience for being, it's very obvious what he was doing. I'm sure looking back on it, he would probably not do it again because of this whole furore around it. But of course it wasn't. It was just raw emotion from Elon. And that is what I like about Trump as well. Not just Elon Musk, but Elon Musk, especially in the way that he's reacted to Keir Starmer and the way that he reacted to reading those transcripts from what happened, with the Pakistani rape gangs. The reaction we're seeing from Elon Musk is raw emotion.
Yeah.
And he should not be denied his freedom of speech or criticized in any way for calling out something that he is actually very in tune with the British public.
But that's the thing, genuine honesty, not this politicians wrap it up in waffle and just, word salad of emotions and then no emotion at all. I completely agree with you. I'm looking forward to seeing what Trump 2.0 brings in and what it means for the world. I mean, we've seen the impact, we've seen the impact already, the Hamas Israel deal. Many say that was thanks to Trump because he said this better be sorted by the time I get in and heaven, look what happens less than 24 hours before he comes in. It's all sorted. So, we'll see what happens. Moving this side of the pond to the far more gloomy, dreary, not as cold United Kingdom. What is going on? Because we had the news late last night to try and, I think, deflect a bit of attention whilst Trump's inauguration stole the front pages, that we will have an inquiry into the Southport attacks. And we will obviously, the suspect, I'm not even going to do him the justice of reading his name. He has changed his plea to guilty as the trial began. And now we will have a public inquiry into what happened. And Keir Starmer stood up in Number 10 this morning and said that, failures were made. He was known to the Prevent scheme 3 times. He'd been referred to it. We will leave no stone unturned. All these sorts of things. I mean, can you just remind everyone, like they need reminding, what was the Southport attack and why is this such a big thing ingrained in people's minds?
Well, what happened in Southport was, I think, shocked the nation to the core. We've had terrorist attacks in this country, but there's something very, very deeply emotive, obviously, about children being murdered, which there is no other word for it, by a crazed terrorist or alleged terrorist. I think we can say he's a terrorist. Now they've said that he's got links to terrorism. And it shook the nation. And I was actually on, I wasn't on holiday. I went holiday just after it happened. So it was a really kind of difficult thing to do. I was literally getting on my plane the day or so after it happened. And then of course I followed the whole thing afterwards. But with what happened with Southport, I don't know where to start on this, to be honest. It's very difficult to know where to start. Let's start with what Keir Starmer said this morning. So Keir Starmer, it was announced yesterday that Keir Starmer would be addressing the nation at 8:30 this morning, to give us an update on Southport, which is very ominous. So he stood up this morning, and I think what he was doing was he was getting ahead of a story which he knew was developing and he knew he probably hasn't got an answer for. So he admitted in front of everybody this morning that he knew that the suspect had links to terrorism pretty much from the get-go. So within hours of it happening. In fact, I've seen people that have said that Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper would have known in real time. Yeah, almost real time, what was going on as it was happening. They would have been briefed by the security services.
So that is so crucial, because I'm pretty sure what you're about to say is the fact that when it happened, they told the public that this was not terror related. They told the public this isn't. And every other time there's a terror attack, we get told straight away, we think this is terror related. We're bringing everyone we can to deal with this.
Correct. The way that this was handled was a disaster. And I've heard that word used not just by commentators, but by legal professionals and barristers who completely disagree with Keir Starmer's pathetic excuses that he came out with this morning.
Interesting.
So the police, the CPS probably advised him to say that, don't confirm anything. Don't tell anyone that this is terror related yet, for whatever bizarre reason they could think of. And the police, Yvette Cooper, Keir Starmer, withheld that information. And as you remember, we saw the photograph released of the suspect of him at school, a very, very old photograph. So the public were led to believe that this was not terror related, and it caused an absolute explosion of people trying to work out what happened online.
Yeah.
So there was an information gap or an information vacuum that was presented by the authorities on this. And of course, now we know that Keir Starmer knew all along that there were links to terrorism. Now, what I find absolutely astonishing about this whole thing is when Keir Starmer stood up today and said that he tried to give us a reason as to why he withheld that information from the public. And unfortunately, it just doesn't stack up.
Right.
His reasoning is that if he'd have told the public that it was terror related, the case would have collapsed. That was his excuse.
Right.
Now that isn't strictly true. We actually had, thankfully, journalists there in the room with him, who called him out. I was quite surprised in this. One of them was Paul Brand from ITV.
Yeah, that shocked me, hearing ITV calling out the left-wing Prime Minister.
Yeah, and it's because, he wouldn't have been expecting that from ITV or Paul Brand. But but the reason they know this is because journalists are very well versed in what they are allowed to print and not print,
absolutely.
and what they can say. So they're just as well versed in this as Keir Starmer is, or anyone is, especially, or more than anyone, I guess, because of the jobs that they do. So they know full well that there was a legitimate window where Keir Starmer, now that window is up for debate on how big it is, but it's a minimum of 8 hours, and it's a maximum of right up until the point that he was charged.
Yeah.
So I think he was charged on the 1st of August. And so we could have been told any information up until him being charged anyway. So that's been confirmed by legal professionals. But there's this definite 8-hour window at the beginning that there was this massive information gap, and that's what excuse me, and that was essentially the most crucial time, I think, that 8 hours.
Yeah.
That 8-hour window was essentially when you could tell on social media that day that tensions were rising and rising and rising, and people were getting angrier. I will include myself in that. I've got a daughter. I've got an 8-year-old daughter who's the same age as some of those kids. You don't need to be a parent to feel that at all. It was just my personal experience of that day. I was in bits. I'm sure, like most people were. I could not contain my emotion. I was angry at a cellular level with everything that had happened that day. So, and then to be called, I was talking about it just like everyone else on social media, and to be labelled far right by Keir Starmer.
Yeah. And this is the thing.
Made me furious.
That is the thing where this just went out the window. Any other prime minister, any other disaster, terrorist attack, whatever it is, calls a press conference, unites the nation, pulls everyone together and says, we believe that this was a terrorist attack. Everyone's been called in. We're doing everything we can to get whatever information we can. Thoughts are with the victims and the family. That's what you do. You be a statesman. I remember Theresa May, when we had the London Bridge attacks, and obviously Westminster and Parliament and all these sorts of things. I remember it vividly. And then instead, what we had was Keir Starmer call this quick press conference. And as you say, I understand that there's angers out there, but jumping on the bandwagon of the far right, once again, you can blame the far right and just brush people. And actually, people were just wanting answers. And obviously, we'll bring Nigel Farage into the conversation. Nigel Farage asked these questions very openly and has since been blamed and labelled for everything that happened afterwards. And now, today, he's pretty much been proven right that things were being held from the public, that things could have been put out into the record. Perhaps not everything that Nigel was saying or thinking was right, but the overarching questions of are things being held back from us turned out to be true.
Absolutely, and it was appalling to blame Nigel Farage for that. It was very similar, actually, of what the left are doing to Elon Musk. It's a distraction technique. They're having a go at Nigel Farage because they know talking about the thing that he's actually talking about is far more difficult. So it's very easy for them to attack Nigel Farage. But I would argue, and this is my opinion, and I know I don't hold this opinion alone either, is that Keir Starmer made those riots worse. Arguably, he caused them.
I completely agree with you.
And there's two reasons for that. First off, to react to people who were hurt, upset, worried about their children by calling them far right, that would have fanned the flames without a shadow of a doubt. That to me is just unforgivable. And this decision that he made, he was the prime minister. There's no one more senior than him in the country to withhold information from the public. So he did two things. He withheld the information and then he gaslit the entire nation by focusing on calling everybody far right. And it makes me sick. He actually did interviews in between those press conferences where he sat down and he said that his biggest worry is the far right. Now, if you know anything about this country, we do not have a organized threatening far right in this country. It just does not exist. Of course, we have people that are far right in this country. We have racists in this country, just like every other country in the world. But we do not have an organized far right that poses any sort of threat in this country. We do, however, have a very serious problem with people who do not share our values and Islamic extremism. But those are the two things, jumping back to what I was saying, those are the two things that Keir Starmer did, in my view, to fan the flames of the riot at worst, at best, and at worst, he caused them by the way that he created that information vacuum. So the way that he has handled this is utterly shameful, and he is not fit to be anywhere near office.
And let's be clear, the things that were being hidden from the public are the fact that this guy had been referred to the government's counter-terrorism program called Prevent 3 times.
At least 3 times. It could have been more, apparently.
He had been expelled and suspended from his school, and then on return assaulted somebody with a hockey stick. He had planned to go back to that school the week before the Southport attacks, and was only stopped because his father apparently stopped him, and there's some confusion about whether he had money to pay for the taxi. The guy was creating ricin, a chemical weapon, ricin, and his next door neighbours didn't know anything of this. You know, think of the safety there. You could at least reassure the public that this is what we've discovered. These are what we're doing to keep everyone safe. And by the way, if you live next door to number, 28, we've evacuated you so we can clear the place and keep you safe. It just blows my mind. He had a terrorist handbook, for crying out loud.
It's astonishing. And I think if you didn't already just mention it, apologies if you did, he was also caught with a knife multiple times.
Right? Of course.
So, I mean, all of this, I mean, part of you is just going to ask yourself, why? You know, what is it about Keir Starmer? Because it's not the first time he's done something like this, where he feels like he has to infantilize the population, that we can't possibly know that he had links to terrorism because can't be trusted with that information. I mean, it's absolute nonsense.
Well, it's just not true. Every other terrorist attack, it happens. Every other time there is a terrorist attack, the first thing the government tells you is if it's terrorism or not. That's the first thing that they do.
He's not going to live this down, I don't think.
No.
And I'm not saying
what are the repercussions here? Because, obviously Labour have this humongous majority. They're hated in the public. The polls are through the floor. But there is no mechanism to get rid of him or this government. What are the repercussions other than kicking this into the public inquiry long grass?
The repercussions are tangible, I believe, and they are that this is just another very, very significant problem that will be hanging around Keir Starmer for the length of his tenure as Prime Minister, for however long that will be. We could sit here and do an entire show on every single disaster that Keir Starmer. In fact, we probably need more than a show. We need a week.
I was going to say, I don't think there's enough bandwidth in the world.
Freebies. Lord Ali, and
I know.
And I'm going. Winter fuel allowance, the farmers, the inheritance tax. Sorry, I just said that. The jobs tax, and the fact that we've got on them. You could just go on and on and on and on about all the things that Keir Starmer has done. Now, what this does is this adds yet again. Oh, and I forgot to say, which is kind of a point to what I'm saying, is his popularity is through the floor. It's utterly appalling, right? So think about this. All of his MPs in his party are all, constantly got their head in their hands with every single decision that he's making at the moment. Not all of them, obviously, who'd be supporting him, but we have to bear in mind that Keir Starmer is not liked at all within his own party. They do not like him at all. I think it's too early. That I don't think they will make a move on him now at all. But what this does, the reason I'm saying that this will potentially have a tangible repercussion is because this will be another conversation in the tea rooms of the Labour Party behind Keir Starmer's back about yet another mishandling of a situation. And it could not be more serious. This mishandling led to riots.
Personally, I think this is the biggest cock up of the entire Labour government so far. I mean, it's a long list. You know, the 2-tier, the free gear, the never here, freezing pensioners, the winter fuel allowance, raising taxes when they said they weren't. I mean, I did a long list of it on my X account, you know, talking about how we've got economists as chancellors who actually are accountants and, you know, locking up people for nasty words and a fake £22 billion black hole. The next thing to add on to that list is Southport cover-up, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think what's going to happen is it's not going to happen yet, because if you look at the kind of poll of polls or individual polling of the Labour Party, surprisingly, they're still, you know, relatively. I've seen I think on the poll of polls, they're still first, but there are individual polls that put them second and third. But it's within the margin of error. As we know,
the polls at the moment, frankly, it is a three-way battle now between the Conservatives, Reform and Labour. Like, one poll will say Labour are a point ahead, the next poll will say Reform are, the next poll will say the Conservatives. To be honest, I actually think people are just fed up of politics. So fed up here and seeing how beautiful and wonderful it is over on the States, and just coming back here and going, oh, God.
Well, I think what will happen is, and I say when, not if, when that Labour polling starts falling and you see Reform taking even more of a percentage of the vote, and you see possibly even the Conservatives eating in a bit to the Labour vote because they are that unpopular, that might be, and if that remains the case in another 2 years' time, I think you could see MPs making moves. There's already MPs on manoeuvres. You've got Wes Streeting on manoeuvres without a shadow of a doubt. He's apparently been reported that he's in the you know, parliamentary bars, buttering everyone up and buying them drinks.
I've heard this too from many a source.
Yeah. So what it's going to take, I think they would move. They'd love to move now, but I don't think that they will. And until what we're seeing is reflected in the polls, and it will be.
Until literal breaking point, until the point of no return. And at that point, they can almost cast, you know, Keir Starmer out as the scapegoat and say it was entirely you. He's gone now, and hopefully they can argue there's a fresh start.
You could also argue as well, you know, people say that, as you've rightly pointed out, that the Labour Party have this massive majority and they don't need to do anything. Well, actually, with a massive majority in a midterm, you could get rid of Keir Starmer, take the hit, and it wouldn't really make a huge amount of difference to the polling.
And crack on with the popular things, which were actually in your manifesto instead of, you know, whatever you want to say wasn't.
It won't improve things for the Labour Party unless they literally change direction, and they're not going to do that. The reason it's so bad for the Labour Party is A, Keir Starmer's leadership. It's just been appalling for the reasons we've discussed. But B, the economy. Yeah. The economy is not going to get any better. Over the next 2 or 3 years, people are going to feel like they've got less money in their pockets. And it's going to get financially more difficult for people. We know this to be true. We're starting to see it happen now. We've seen the jobs figures come out. And it's not unexpected, as the left-wing media seem to have said. Unexpectedly, unemployment has risen.
Ridiculous.
It wasn't unexpected at all.
And the frustration I have, with this as well is it's almost repeat a lie enough times, and they're going to have to give in. And believe me, you know, it's one of the few things that I can defend the Conservatives on is at the end of our time when everything else was crashing and falling. The economy was growing, debt was falling, inflation was down from 11% and more than half. Things were getting better. Taxes were starting to be cut. People had money back in their pockets. Shops and businesses were starting to get going again. Like, we turned that corner. And all you hear now from Labour is there wasn't even a corner. We were miles away from the corner. The £22 billion black hole that they can't provide any evidence for. Like, you literally cannot talk a country into a crisis, and that's exactly what they've done. They've talked the UK into effectively an economic disaster.
They have, and that is why I don't think Keir Starmer, and there's a lot of people that might disagree with me, understandably, but I don't think he will be Prime Minister leading us into the next general election. I mean, there is a chance. I can sort of see it, depending on whether people view the party to have settled down potentially. You know, the news cycle is a bit more friendly towards Labour over the next 4 years. But I just can't see it. They're a walking disaster. I mean, it's been the worst. I mean, I can't remember it being as bad as it's ever been in the United Kingdom under this short tenure of this Labour government. It's not going to get any better. They're not going to sort of learn how to drive within that short space of time.
Yeah.
We are heading for a disaster, and it's going to happen. And the only good thing I can take from all of this is that Labour are going to be out of power for a generation after this.
Well, they should be, because they've frozen the top generation, they taxed the middle generations, and they've broken their promises to the young generation by saying, oh, well, we're going to actually increase, tuition fees, and we're going to cut stamp duty level threshold, so you actually have to pay no matter what house you pretty much buy. It's just ridiculous. I was actually just looking at the odds of Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister come the next general election. He is evens to be Prime Minister and 5 to 6 on to not. So already, people say, look at the polls, but the bookmakers know. The bookies are saying he's not. He's not.
Maybe they put Farage by, just out of curiosity.
let's see. Well, Conservatives are currently predicted to be the UK's most seats, then Labour, then Reform. Lib Dems miles away on 66-1. I mean, the Lib Dems.
I saw it. Was I think a stats for lefties or something like that thing that came out the other day that showed Reform would get 209 seats. They'd literally just.
I saw this morning.
They would just be the largest party by a number of seats, which would give Reform first dibs, as you know, on forming a government.
Absolutely.
And I can see that scenario happening. I can't really see, unless the Conservatives have some sort of, complete character change between now and the next election, I just can't see it. If they can, put it this way, if the Conservatives carry on as they are, this kind of vacuous, no policy, lame, still responsible for some of the problems that we're dealing with now party, I can't see them improving. All the momentum is with Reform at the moment. There's a real genuine buzz. And to sort of jump back to our very first question, Reform have got Elon Musk and President Trump backing them.
This is the thing. The next few years, everything is up for grabs. We've never had this sort of three-party moment before. And I obviously, as a Conservative councillor, Conservative political commentator, I want the Conservatives to succeed and to be that party who comes out on top. And I can absolutely see it. It will be Reform or the Conservatives deciding who forms the next government with them. Yeah. And it's sure as hell not going to be Labour. And I can see it becoming, this over the next couple of years, this relationship starting to have to build where we realise no one is going to get an outright majority. We're in this sort of hung parliament phase. We've got to start all working together.
I think it'll be a very late decision.
Yeah.
I think
literally both, the last minute.
It'll be right at the last minute. Both parties will big themselves up, rightly so. And I think, I'm going to call it now, I think Reform will get first dibs. I think they'll have down.
Lee calls Reform first.
I think they'll be the largest party, but not big enough to form a government by themselves. And you and I know that for exactly the reasons, even if it was the other way around. So if the Conservatives are a large party but can't form a government, or Reform, they will do a deal.
They have to.
Of course they will.
Nigel Farage as Deputy Prime Minister, Rupert Lowe as Home Secretary, Lee Anderson as Minister for Common Sense or something like that. Bring that role back.
Or Farage as Prime Minister. And
of course, if Reform is the largest party. And to be honest, it's a really serious point, because there is so much hate out there, and there are so much people who are fed up, and so many people who are annoyed and just disengaged from politics entirely. I mean, we saw the Call a General Election petition reach over 3 million signatures. People are annoyed, but there are processes, and a government wins the election, and they have that mandate for the entire term, no matter what you want. That is part of democracy, but we are seeing this pivotal change now to 3 choices. You can pretty much in any of these seats vote for who you want, and you may well get it.
Yeah, the political landscape is completely different now. There are a lot of commentators that have not quite worked this out yet. Yeah. They still think that it's impossible for someone to break through the first past the post system, and it just can't happen. It's because they still don't realise that the electorate in the country is changing, and it's changing dramatically. People now are much more likely to be a floating voter, which is, in my view, is what you should be.
And there's so much information out there. People are educated. People are engaged in conversations and discourse. Politics isn't just this thing now where only a very few people really know. But like people can get it every single second of every single day.
And yeah, absolutely. And this stuff that we're seeing from this absolutely calamitous Labour government with Keir Starmer repeatedly driving that party into a brick wall on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I just cannot see. It's not going to be, the next election will be a right-wing majority, but without the ability to form a government.
Correct.
And you know, and I know that the public will not forgive the Conservatives or Reform if they do not do a deal and stop another Labour government. They just won't be forgiven for it.
And that, you know, historically, you know, historically, politics has always been, if you vote for them, you're going to end up with that person. You know, tactical voting and all that sort of stuff. You know, Conservatives, you say, if you vote for Reform, you're going to end up with Labour. But I can see it happening come 2029-ish. We are going to have a real conversation about, right, where are we miles away in the polls? Reform, you could go and have those. Likewise, where we're just ahead of Labour and Reform is taking those votes. The Conservatives will have those. And you have this behind the scenes deal, but it's not something that you publicise early because suddenly all your voters think you're selling out. You know, I can just see it happening. But, you know, the next few years are going to be really interesting as we watch Labour literally drive into a wall.
It's going to be very, very interesting because all I see at the moment is I see a completely non-existent Conservative Party. They do not exist. They're not barely even on the radar. And people are still moaning about the situation that they caused themselves. And I see Reform absolutely buzzing. And I wouldn't be saying this if there was this big buzz about Reform and it wasn't being reflected in the polling, right?
Yeah.
That's something slightly different. And that's actually something we were going through, I think, before the election, because they were on 8 or 9%.
Yeah.
You know,
and now Reform are 25% in most polls, 20 to 25%.
Exactly. So unless something magical happens, and I don't mean in a good way, Reform will be the largest party at the next election.
And you know, I've always been willing to say, even though I'm a Conservative, and even though Conservative does or whatever, I'm always willing to hold our hands up and say, the Conservatives messed up a lot of things. We absolutely deserve this time in opposition. And you're right, you know, we have this sort of vacuum at the moment where we're rebuilding, we're reviewing things, whatever. You know, Kemi's now starting to say that there's some things that we're going to talk about. But Reform, credit to Reform, and I've always said this, it used to be the economy stupid. Now it's comms stupid. And Reform are absolutely phenomenal at this. They have filled that void, created themselves as the opposition, even though they've only got 5 MPs. And frankly, we let them. And I find that as a real frustration myself, that we have got to get ourselves in order, because otherwise I can completely see it where Reform absorb us and that's it.
As it stands, that's what will happen. There's no way that Kemi's strategy, if she maintains this strategy, we're already seeing, not many, I admit, but we've seen a couple of MPs now turn out, speak to the media saying, yeah, this strategy is not working. It's got to change. I can't remember who it was, but I think about a week or so ago, a Conservative MP. But at the end of the day, we're all Conservatives, right? We need to bear that in mind. Unfortunately, there's not many Conservatives in the Conservative Party, but we are all Conservatives. And this is why I think this is something where I do agree with people who are not necessarily fans of Reform, is we do need to unite the right. But I see
divided. This has been the benefit for the Conservative Party for years. There has been one right-wing party, broad church Conservative Party, and then multiple factions on the left, and that's been the benefit for years. And now we are seeing a genuine choice with Reform on the right, another option with Conservatives, and then forget Labour and like these alternatives. And I think what you said there is really important. We are all Conservatives. Forget the big C. We are all Conservatives. We're carrying conservative policies, right-wing policies, those sorts of things. That's what we all agree on.
Yes, but like I say, I repeat, the problem the Conservatives do have, the party, big C, is that there aren't many proper Conservatives in that party. There's a lot of Liberal Democrats that could be quite easily be in the Liberal Democrat Party who are going to prevent the Conservatives being unified around a single policy, like, for example, leaving the ECHR. You know, that's a dividing line.
Leave it. There's the opinion. Leave it done. You know, I just,
Yeah, exactly. It's very simple.
the biggest frustration for me, the whole Rwanda scheme. I completely agree with the Rwanda scheme. Absolutely fantastic. As soon as the court judgments say you can't do Rwanda, I had two choices. Fine, goodbye to those courts, or go and find another country. But the policy itself was absolutely fine. And the fact that we didn't have the gumption to force it through, I just, that it's one of those easy own goals.
And it was because there were people in the Conservative Party that found the thought of sending illegal migrants to a third country as appalling, because they're Liberal Democrats.
Dear, they sound too much like those lefty lawyers and Keir Starmer, who's a lawyer, not a leader, as I think Kemi said the other week. Look, Lee, I'm very, very grateful, and thank you very much. We are going to be having a lot of conversations, I think, over the next few years about, obviously, reform, Conservative Party, whether we one day might see that oxymoron of Conservative Reform Party, you know, conserving and changing at the same time. But no, I'm very, very grateful. And coming back to what we were originally talking about, the Southport attacks, for me, I want to send the message out there that this was absolutely just utterly wrong. And that I think every stone, as Keir Starmer said, every stone has to be turned. And that includes him. And it includes people in this Labour government who knew stuff, but didn't tell the public. And I think that is a really crucial thing, because suddenly you can say words like cover up. You can say things like holding back the truth. You can say misleading. And I think that's going to be really interesting over the next few months. Do you have a final reflection, obviously, bringing this back to Southport and what we need to see?
Only that probably the biggest feeling that I've had from this whole thing just today from listening to Keir Starmer is that, I mean, trust was already at all-time lows. But what Keir Starmer, what Yvette Cooper and what the police have done is they have completely destroyed the trust, or what trust was left between the state and the British people. And yet again, just like I had this revelation over Brexit in, 2016, when I realised that the entire establishment wanted to make me not vote to leave the European Union, that revelation to find out that the impartial establishments that I trusted didn't want me to make a decision. They wanted me to do what they wanted to do, and trust was broken between me and the establishment then. And I feel like this is happening again, but on a much more serious level. That where I'm left with all of this is, if I hear the words, it is not terror related, from our authorities again, I am not going to believe a word of it. And Keir Starmer has done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Lee, thank you very much. To quote Elon Musk, I send my heart out to you. We'll see if I get some criticism for that in the morning. Yeah, quick, but gonna hat on for the last minute. But look, thank you very much. I am very grateful. Look, that's been me, Matthew and Lee. We're doing our deep dive here on Vote Watch. Get involved in the comments, have the discussion, and don't forget, we've got Trump 2.0. He's going to make America great again. Well, God, we need him here in Britain, don't we? Anyways, thank you. Cheers, thanks, and have a good night.